Hey, Patrick. Thanks for joining the AI Champs today. Really excited to have you, especially with your expertise on the intersection of crypto and AI and DePIN, all that cool stuff. So let's start with please give some brief intro, like how you got into crypto, how you got into AI, what made you excited about all of that stuff.
Yeah, Tony, thanks. It's great to be here. This is awesome. Quite a treat and a pleasure to be speaking with you. Um, let's see, first, I got into crypto because I was a proprietary trader. So I was a proprietary trader for about 12 years prior to getting into crypto full time. And through the course of that, at a firm called DRW, which has a major crypto trading arm called Cumberland. I met with the founder of Cumberland, who was also my boss at the time. He was really into Bitcoin. He was actually during the block size wars a big block maximalist. Really nice guy, but he sent me my first Bitcoin in 2015, and it was really interesting to me. He sent it from wallet to wallet. So that was the first Bitcoin I got. And after that, I thought it was really fascinating technology. I thought it was very interesting. But for the most part, for the next 5 years, I didn't really get into the technology aspect of it. I more or less just used it as a trading vehicle because it was extremely high volatile and interesting. So I just traded it back and forth. But then
When
fast
was
forward
it?
to this is 2015.
15.
But yeah, I bought some Bitcoin, held on to it, did a really good job. I got a 3x gain on my Bitcoin buys at $400, so pretty excited about that. Um, but yeah, so then I did that for I did prop trading, and then I went to buy sweat equity research. And then after that, I decided I'd move into crypto. So right now, what I do is I work at VanEck as a research analyst, and my job is kind of two things. Like one, I work for two different funds. I find and then vet investments and then present them. I'm on the investment committee, so we work through why we want to invest in usually a token or perhaps a private raise for a crypto project or even an equity like Coinbase. And then we put it in the fund if it's good. The other part is to write pieces that demonstrate thought leadership in crypto. One of which topics that we looked at, which is very popular right now, is crypto and AI. So I did a pretty deep dive, 15-page report on the different projects working crypto and AI and the potential and the possibilities in space.
Yeah, actually, that's how I initially got to know your work. I read your report on the state of DePIN. Was really interesting, and yeah, that's why I got really excited to have you on the AI Champs. Um, so about AI, when did you got kind of interested specifically in AI? Maybe it was separate from blockchain. Maybe it was because of blockchain. But what got you hooked on this?
Oh, that came about because like one of the biggest things I would do as a proprietary trader is build models, typically using Python to ingest data, assess it, and then build a model for what I thought the fair price was. The fair value would be for, in my case, US Treasury bond spreads. And so that was like a really difficult technical lift for me. I didn't have a programming background prior to trading, but of course, in the course of being a trader, I learned quite quickly. Um, so using something like ChatGPT 3 to me was amazing because you could build the base of a really interesting code that would be able to analyze things. And then you can build out modules and basically make anything you want out of it. So that to me was extremely fascinating. And the best part about it was that you could error check it as well. So if I wrote something that was incomplete, I couldn't bug check it myself. It would do it very quickly. And I thought that was like revolutionary, and I thought that was like really fascinating. So that's kind of like the first reason I really got interested in it, just because it was a really good tool to use.
Yeah. So, what was it your first generative AI tool, like the ChatGPT, or you tried something before?
No, that was the first exposure. to at least generative AI. I had done coursework in machine learning, pattern analysis, pattern recognition, things like that, because it was applicable to trading. But I didn't really do anything in deep learning. Most of the things I did were relatively simple algorithms, so kind of like a base of understanding of how I would suppose it would work. But once I started using generative AI, it became very clear how powerful and interesting it was.
Yeah, I 100% agree here. And so you mentioned before that you didn't have experience in programming, in coding. Like you had like literally zero experience, or you had some?
Um, I had a bunch of public courses like Coursera, Python for everybody. So
Mhm.
basically public coursework I would do. So I'm more or less like intermediate to a novice. But then like, if you use something like ChatGPT, it gives you a substantial leg up. Like you can really understand, you kind of understand what you have to write, but sometimes you don't do the syntax properly, or you want to do more complex things. And ChatGPT is able to like build that out and tease that out. And plus, it's a huge time saver. So that was the biggest component of it, right? If I'm making a module and trying to figure out like, okay, how to do statistical analysis, I could go and maybe use R, I could use Python, but if I could use Python, it's usually better. It's usually easier, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I personally, I do a lot of coding, and I use, actually, I don't use ChatGPT for a long time. I use basically right now, these models are integrated in the development environment, IDEs like Cursor, VS Code. Basically, inside the code editor, you have like say GPT or Claude that helps you write code, helps you check, explains you the code, and it's like it's really crazy. Uh, I like what do I compare it with? It's like, okay, one thing, it helps you write the code, but in another thing, it um, basically teaches you using like new libraries on the way. So basically, right now, what you use, what you would spend like hours on, you are literally just learning on. You spend like minutes on just writing the code and getting the comments and like basically already using it. So, and that's a fascinating thing to me, because I always thought that the knowledge was always kind of divided from the object of what we're learning. And here it's in exactly the same place. We're not learning language and then going coding. We're learning language while coding, and it's really amazing.
It's very similar to if you're in Indonesia and you're learning Bahasa in the progress of talking with people and like seeing like instant feedback. Whereas usually with coding, you're gonna write something and then you're gonna go and test it and it works or it doesn't. And seeing ChatGPT do it in real time and you'll be able to understand, like you said, explicitly what it's doing and why it's doing, having it explained to you, I think is tremendous. It's like having a real teacher on site with you.
Yeah, and another use case here. So, yeah, you mentioned about it helps you fix the errors. That's another interesting thing. So, normally, if you experience an error in a code, you will just say Google it, go to on Stack Overflow, or some resources like that, which I mean is okay solution, but in many cases, your error may be slightly different. So, it is not that straightforward to find the exact same situations, while AI kind of doesn't search for specific like strings, it search for meaning. So it kind of finds the data it was trained on similar mistakes and gives you the solution. And it's kind of like an interface to knowledge. So before that, you needed to copy, paste into the search, and then go through all the search results and try to find the one that actually applicable to you. With the generative AI, you actually kind of search, but you get the tailored solution, like tailored to your specific task right away. And it's just crazy how much faster we get access to the all the information that's available in the internet.
No, it's incredible. Like the way in which I look at it is just taking disorganized information and organizing it according to your prompts or your specifications, which is a massive time saver. It's creating disentropy, right? It's taking entropy and cobbling out something meaningful out of the internet, something useful. And yeah, it's a great tool. It's been incredibly helpful.
Okay, and so maybe let's stop for a minute on VanEck. So in does VanEck kind of already invest into the AI space? What's the kind of current stance of the organization towards AI?
Yeah, I think it'd be a little helpful to introduce like how VanEck works. So basically, the way to think about VanEck is it's an entity where you can plug in modules. The entity itself is really just a marketing engine with some expertise, maybe some thought leaders in different spaces. And the modules you plug into it are various funds. So that might be something like an ETF, where literally it just invests in a mandate and it's automatic, right? Traders will allocate according to a weighting or according to a benchmark. And then there's something more hands-on like a mutual fund. Mutual fund would just be like there's a manager, he allocates based upon his selection preferences or his model. And so from that standpoint, VanEck has several funds, some semiconductor focused funds that look at AI and kind of generally invest in the infrastructure, the picks and shovels. And that's our approach. The funds where I work, we use AI as one of the sleeves to invest in that we think will bring a good use case to crypto. And that's like generally how the firm works, where there's individual players that have interests in investing it. But for the most part, the fund is kind of agnostic to anything that it invests in. But generally, the CEO who takes more of an active stance in these things thinks it's a really fascinating, useful tool. And even internally, we've been trying to use it effectively.
Mm. So okay, and what's what excites you the most currently in on this intersection of AI and blockchain? What use cases you see are the most promising in the short and in the long term?
Yeah, I think at least in the short term, the most interesting thing might be identity. And identity doesn't just mean like identifying a certain model and understanding with the proof. That's up to a blockchain that this model is the one you're using, but also whether or not you're interacting with an agent, like proof of humanity. I think that did be going to be really important going forward because if you think about it, when you have AI agents doing things on the internet, you need some kind of limiting factor. One of the which ways you can limit it is just limiting traffic, limiting IP addresses. But there's a number of crypto AI projects that are actually allowing people to lease their IP addresses through local networks to AI agents to perform tasks. So the problem is over time, like how are you going to be able to meter these agents? How are you going to be able to identify them? And I think crypto is a good way in which you can use something that has built-in Sybil resistance, right? When you do a transaction on the blockchain, it costs money. It costs money because you utilize limited source resources. Very limited, of course, resources on purpose because it takes a lot to be able to process a block and send it throughout the world and verify it. And I think having that as kind of a limitation to some respects on AI would be helpful.
Hmm. So you see the solving that kind of the problem of identity through the monetary limitation, but mm, so maybe let's stop here for a minute. Um, so the use case I see with the proof of identity on blockchain is basically some kind of oracles that uh, prove that the owner of this specific wallet is a real person, let's say, like this. But if we are, so do you see any ways to do this without the oracles, just somehow using AI?
Um, we talked about that internally, but the problem is that like in blockchain distributed systems, you come to consensus on a block being true or not true. And then so the problem would be the passing of information between the different nodes in the network. There's only so much information you can pass. So what's like a really simple way that you can do that, right? One of the ways might be to compress that data, compress it using like a zero knowledge proof, compress as well the proof of that. So that's something that you could do that would inherently be interesting. But the problem is that you're still limited by the architecture of the network, right? You're still passing data, and how much data can you really pass through, come to consensus on, and bring it to a user in a way that gives like a really good user experience? And sometimes the answer is like, well, you probably can't, right? Because if you think about like how long it takes to pass through a large node network of nodes and bring it back to the user, that might be a few seconds. And that's not enough latency. It's not fast enough for most use cases where people want to use AI. But that could change over time, depending upon how people build these things.
Hmm. So, okay, identity.
So, like, one of the things that I think is pretty interesting is the project called Worldcoin. I don't know if you're familiar with Worldcoin, but it's one of Sam Altman's side projects. And what he's doing is he's going around and scanning people's irises. And irises apparently have unique fingerprints, for lack of a better term, that give each person a unique identifying marker. Now, that's not uploaded to the blockchain precisely. It's actually encrypted and uploaded to a separate managed database. But each person has their ID tied to their crypto address. And then so when you're interacting with someone online, you can understand this person's real. So imagine like if I'm gonna log into a website, right? Like the website doesn't really know if you're human or not. Typically, you could just be a computer running lots of different websites at the same time, scraping data, whatever. But if you tie that to a crypto wallet, so when I log in, I have to sign a transaction. You do have a little bit more plausible information about that person being not a bot. Now, back to your earlier point, is there a Oracle problem? In this case, there might be still, because you have to still trust that database, and trust that fingerprint, and trust that it's real. Like the whole entire like project itself of doing the world coin, the world ID, is that you're scanning irises. So you have trust factors inherent in that. And the Oracle problem, of course, is still not solved, right? So having AI kind of solve that problem, I haven't seen people do anything that's very persuasive at working. There's a few projects I've heard of that people have pitched to me, but again, going back to the distributed system problem of coming to consensus on that data, I just don't know like how that might work in terms of trading the data, assessing it, and then bringing it back in a way that's fast enough for most use cases.
Hmm. So, and in the world coin case, so they store kind of the footprint or like the hash of the iris in their database. But basically, for me as a user to then use my wallet, I need kind of to use some scanner.
No, no, that's how they upload the iris. So you go to someone with literally this giant orb, and the orb then scans your iris and then creates a hash of that and then uploads that to a database. And so then that's tied to an address through a non-fungible token, an NFT. That's a soul-bound token. So you can't, that address can't send it to anyone else, right? So there's some problems that's solved by that, but not a lot. Like for example, you could still give that address to somebody else. But you think theoretically people would guard it more closely, but there's still like a ton of holes in that identification verification technique.
Yeah, like the big problem I see here, I mean, actually two of them is like the centralization, because really we are introducing a huge trust factor here. And the second one is verification. So I mean, I could understand if it was like, for example, if I'm doing a transaction, I need to scan my iris, and then this kind of hash is compared to the one that is stored. But then we have all kinds of problems, like what if, what, like there are a lot of blind people, or person can become blind, or yeah, lots of stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of holes in it. It's just assuming that like the person that has the private key to this address, to this blockchain address, is gonna basically use that themselves. Like that's one of the biggest holes. Like that's the biggest problem with the whole thing. But we're still far away from figuring out like what challenges do we need to solve when we have an AI agent centric economy on blockchain. Like when you talk to a lot of these crypto projects and you say, okay, like what use case do you have that needs millions of transactions per second? Like that's the end goal of some of these systems, is they're building things that like incorporate that. And if you look at like all the world's data, all the ways in which we use the internet, from clicking like buttons to sending money, like the number of transactions you need for that is substantially less. Like we estimate that might be like a few 100,000 max. Well, when you talk to these people, the idea for some of them is that, one, you're going to unlock AI agent micropayments. So their understanding is that these AI agents over time will specialize in one domain or another. And when you go on and you want to accomplish some sort of task, or you want it to build something for you, it will then go to like an AI agent marketplace and then contract those various AI agents to do their specialized task, whatever that might be. And then through blockchain, they will then arrange the series of payments that then compensate those models. And then in turn, because you have blockchain and you have ownership properties of that, you'd hope that the people who built those AI agents would then get paid to their crypto address. So that's kind of like the world in which that they're building for. That's the biggest supposition I've heard from some of these projects. And of course, there's other things you can do on blockchain that might necessitate this huge number of throughput. But that's kind of like the biggest so what for some people. Like for example, Ilya from Near. That's kind of what he's building for, this AI agent economy, where you need all these different pieces of infrastructure because you're going to have the throughput to accommodate the AI agents, or you need the throughput.
Hmm. Yeah, like what I imagine now, kind of a solution. So basically, we have identities confirmed by oracles, but then who, like whichever agent on the network doesn't have an identity, has to have an authorization of some other agent who has an identity, basically a human. So I authorize this agent to, I don't know, buy tickets or send a message to somebody, so that somebody knows that uh, the message may have not been sent by me, but it was authorized by me.
Yeah, and you can see that transparently in the blockchain. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to remember, like going back to the way like current banking systems work. Like because you have KYC AML, which means basically know your customer, anti-money laundering. When you open a bank account, you need to have identity, right? You can't use Venmo, you can't use PayPal unless it knows who you are, it knows you aren't engaging in things they think might be fraud or crime or whatever. So the point is that you can't apply the system to AI agents as we know it today, right? So that's why people think like blockchain's a logical place for AI to be able to trade payments between each other, between the different agents, because you don't need to have that requirement. They can send value where that value might be, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, it doesn't matter. But that's the idea. That's like the supposition that a lot of these projects are coming in with.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, identity is really an interesting use case on the intersection of these two technologies, but it seems like we're a bit not that close to solving that. Uh,
No, no.
anything more short term? You see like some exciting use cases that may come to life. closer?
Yeah, so like one of the ways in which people want, like, again, like going back to the basic principles of crypto, it's a trustless system. You want to have proof that the other party you're interacting with is not committing fraud or stealing your funds, whatever. That's like the basics, right? And so the idea is, okay, like what if you want to apply AI models to perform actions for you on blockchain? What if you want them to invest on your behalf, like put money into decentralized finance, right? Okay, fine. That's a good use case. But then, okay, how do you trust that the model you're using is going to do the proper things? How do you trust it's going to do and not steal your money? It's going to put the money in the correct protocols. Well, supposedly, one of the ways in which they're going to be able to do that is through zero knowledge proofs, where you know the person that built it, you understand that this is the model you're using to perform those actions, and then it goes and does whatever task it needs to. So maybe you might optimize it for just using DeFi to get the best yield, right? Or you might use it to do the best trade. And so those are things you can do. So like, for example, like if I want to do the best trade on blockchain, right? Maybe you have an optimization engine. Maybe you don't want to, maybe you don't know if you trust that though. Like how do you know where it routes that? So having like a proof that activity is one of the ways that you could see blockchain coming to play with AI. So the AI agent does what you tell it to do, right? And then there's a proof generated that what it's doing is correct and is the proper model, and it isn't doing things that are malicious. The same thing could be said about smart contract inspection itself. So like if you look at like building something in Solidity or something in Rust, putting it on a blockchain, there's often one, lots of holes in smart contracts. People often don't remember to do certain things. And then two, there might be malicious bugs hidden with those. So using AI to verify those things is something that's like another more short-term use case that people are excited about. But again, like right now, crypto is just so focused on speculation. Like that's the use case. That's the segment of people who are using it as speculators. So they're trying to drive AI to make it meaningful in the short term to that user base.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. But did you see any projects lately that do, I mean, approach that at least? Like for example, I'm now mentoring Outlier Ventures base camp on AI and blockchain, and like the use cases are totally different. I don't remember any single project related to either identity or or any kind of proofs. So, in your experience, did you see any exciting projects in this space?
Um, so there's a lot of things that are taking like an early approach to it. So one example might be Autonolos and the token's OLOS. And what they do essentially is build AI agents for prediction markets and the infrastructure to facilitate that. Like that's how I understand their approach. So within that, there's not like a ton that pertains specifically to identity. Like the biggest identity project right now is definitely like so that's been kind of my viewpoint as like a liquid token investor. So when it's these early stage type projects, that's been basically the focus.
Hmm. Okay, maybe. Yeah, I'd like to ask you something slightly different, or maybe very different. So, uh, like VanEck is a big fund or umbrella of funds. I don't know how to call it, but basically a huge entity that uh, kind of collects knowledge. You're one of the people who helps the organization collect that knowledge and insights. So, how do you guys view? Do you see any big changes in terms of um, startups as an industry. Like, for example, I see as a big trend solopreneurs. Basically, right now is what we discussed, ChatGPT. Like, one person can create a startup, like technically, that a year or two ago, a team of 10 people would develop for like several months or a year. And now the same can be done by one person in like 1 2 months. So, and this is a quite monumental shift. So probably will also change how the economy works, how the investing works. Have you thought of this?
Yeah, like, so one of the things that we've done is try to make a market for what we think might be in terms of revenues for AI as an industry in the year 2030, 25, 35, whatever arbitrary period, right? And so the idea is like, okay, like, why is AI valuable? At least the way we know it is that AI, at least we measure it, is AI will produce productivity gains, right? And cost savings. And so the idea is trying to project that. To your earlier point, like instead of having 10 people build a startup, maybe you do one, right? And so thinking about all the different cost savings, we come to a number and then we say, okay, based upon those cost savings, right? Where does the value accrue in the value stack, right? So first is the cost savings, and then like what is how do you capture those cost savings? So typically there'd be some sort of like enterprise software, maybe something like a chat GPT, but it goes on your computer, like something that goes in there on the startup, whatever it might be, right? So then from there, it's saying, okay, what can they possibly charge from that? And like, how do you make the companies that use this see the value of this? And again, this is just like one sleeve. But the idea is that, okay, and then from there, like, where does the value dispersion go from there? So from the software creator, people building the models, is it going to be the actual infrastructure, the hardware that's going to be the GPUs that are actually running these models, right? And so that's kind of like how a way in which we think about it and investing accordingly. That's why our semiconductor fund is something that we've really looked at and or that we've really been pushing a lot because we think that most of the value, at least initially, will go in the OEM portion. Over time, we think that those will start moving more towards the software aspect because people will be able to differentiate their software based upon something that adds better value, something that actually pertains to a specific use case. And that's kind of how we see it. And so that's kind of like one of the things that we're investing in.
Mhm. Okay, so actually now is the logical thing to go online, because normally the second part of the conversation, it relates to kind of um, AI anxiety. Like, people are like not sure what the world will be tomorrow, like job loss and stuff like that. Basically, threats and opportunities and how to beat AI anxiety. So I'll start. s- We'll start the. Okay, and we're live. Continuing the conversation with Patrick Bush about AI, Web3, and everything around these technologies. So, yeah, Patrick, we basically reached the point in our conversation where there is a good time to talk about AI anxiety. And the way I see it, there are at least um, three big risks of AI, and like different people will see these risks differently, and maybe some people will see some of these risks, some won't see uh, some of them. So the first one is obviously what most people at least heard of. Maybe not everyone believes in that. Is the job loss, uh, because to AI, to AI agents. The second one is AI going, very powerful AI going into the hands of like malevolent actors, either like dictators or terrorists or you name it. And the third one is kind of much more theoretical, but the AI community is kind of pretty has a pretty good consensus on that this is a very big risk, the AGI, basically. What we will be doing when we reach the stage of AGI, artificial general intelligence, when the AI can do any task a human can do on the same level and then on a better level. So let's start with the first one because a lot of people, I mean, most of the people at least heard of it, the job loss. So, what do you think? Like, how will economy change in the next 5, 10 years? How the people need to prepare for that change, and whether you think it's actually AI will really kill a lot of jobs, or maybe it's just a hype.
I think I think the early iterations you're seeing don't really give me much comfort that they're going to lose a lot of jobs. Like it's just like I see it being used for computer programming. I see it being used for maybe call centers, and those use cases will develop over time. But to me, like there seems to be too much hype over the job loss of the short to medium term. Like it just there's so many things that you need human engagement to accomplish. And I think a lot of companies also just run on inertia. They like to do things the same way they've done it always. And until you start getting a new generation of people that are really used to using these things, you're not going to see like mass firings and layoffs. Like that's my supposition. But I see a lot of ways in which I could be proven wrong. Um, but yeah, that's what I'll go with initially.
So when you talk about like short term, or like what do you think is its short term timeline when we kind of don't have to worry about the mass job loss?
I think I want to say about 5 to 10 years would just be my short term time frame on that. Um, I think the AGI component is really when it becomes worrisome because then it can iterate in ways. Because right now it's kind of like a task-based agent, right? It fulfills what you need. I think over time people will become better at prompting. I think just in general, like human capital will reveal itself to be still useful because it's generating the prompt, it's generating information, it's generating creativity, things that like you have to direct it in a certain capacity. But once you get to the AGI point, it kind of assesses and understands what it needs to do already. That's when I think it becomes problematic. That's when I think you're going to start seeing large swaths of people being unemployed. When it starts anticipating needs and then innovating and acting before that, I think that's like the part that troubles me. That's what I worry about, right? Like people talk about like, okay, like in the future, you're not going to need quantitatively focused people because you can have AI agents or AI math models solve these types of things. That's I think it seems reasonable, logical. But then eventually, like the AI agent will start understanding what the needs of the organization are, how it should go, and then what do you need? Why do you need strategy people? Why do you need consultants? And I think that's where you start seeing that. Once AI can iterate and build its models and assess the agent's needs and then make the choices itself, right? Once that becomes like the focal point, then it becomes the AI agent we all worry about.
Hmm. Um, I'd like to challenge you here. So, like, let's take the support and salespeople. For me, it seems like in 1 2 years, like dozens or hundreds of thousands of people who are doing these jobs today will be completely like they won't be needed.
Oh, I think we're totally in agreement there. I think when you say like the magnitude, like I'm talking about like half of all jobs being gone. You're at the point where you're like, yeah, we're not going to need like, 1% of the sales staff or whatever that may be. I'm talking about the point where it's like large swaths of the population are voting a certain way based upon the way in which AI is integrated.
Yeah, no, obviously, I just gave you an example. So, uh, yeah, I'm not looking at like as a catastrophe of like, say, even all support people losing their jobs. But that's just a good example to think of. So, if these jobs can be already, basically with the snap of a finger, can be fully killed, uh, like how many more jobs do we have already that can be already replaced by AI? And how many more types of jobs will we have, like in say a year, that AI can replace? That's kind of
Yeah,
my
yeah.
concern.
No question. The biggest limiting factor is just the ability of people to effectively use AI to actually accomplish these tasks. And that's one of the things that I think hasn't really been discussed a lot is how good are the people at prompting AI to walk through and solve these issues, right? Because I could go to AI, I can ask it a bunch of questions, and some of those things are useful. Some things are just me just generally asking questions, right? But when you get to the aggregate level, if you have maybe like hundreds or billions, hundreds of millions or billions of people using it, like you need an effective way of sifting through those prompts and thinking, okay, like is this actually going to add value, or is the energy cost, the cost of resources, whether it's network capacity, GPUs, or the sum total of all those things, is it worth it? And to me, like I think that's why like I take more of a bearish view over the short to medium term on the ability of AI to have a huge impact, because effectively until you have like an AI agent or like a set of ways to optimize what people actually want and understand what they want better and innovate for them better, then you're just going to have a lot of, I think, wasted energy, wasted resources where people are just using it like in ineffective ways.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally get your point on the fact that like you need to prompt the models, and it's a skill. Not many people can do it, but for me, it seems like both from like what I see on the market, what I hear in the news, and what I actually experienced myself when, like last year or so, I was literally doing uh, the I was kind of wearing the hats of like dozens of different roles I never had any experience or expertise in. And now I basically, like, for example, if I need to create, I don't know. I created an AI tool and I need to create a website for it. So uh, I need to know front end development. I need to know back end website development. I need to know like the CSS. I need to know like a lot of different stuff. And like before generative AI, I mean, my only option, I would have two options. One is to learn everything myself, but it will take huge amounts of time. It was difficult to learn on the way, uh, or hire somebody. But now, basically, even without any knowledge in the field, but just having some good AI skills, you can do all that stuff. So it seems to me we're like in a few years, and not so many years, we'll just move to the reality where there is an operator, like an AI operator, like a developer, whoever, who operates AI that actually does the job of 1,000 people. Uh, of in today's terms, and like yeah, we'll need operators, but we'll need much fewer probably operators than we have jobs now. Probably the only kind of bright side here is that maybe like every time in the history will kind of uh, there will be a lot of we'll figure out the way to create uh, new types of these operators to maybe create new types of value. Uh, and that's basically the brave new world we can see with that, because like the 1,000 people doing some bullshit today, like, I don't know, writing emails and spending like millions of hours overall a month, like all that is gone, and our energy can be funneled to something that we don't even know now, but something that can move us somewhere in very interesting worlds.
I think I think I think I agree. I think it takes longer than you suppose. I think that we have like a dichotomy of views. I think you're more immersed into technology and you see how it can quickly change things like computer programming and development. And that obviously is like this first best use case. So I think the job losses start there first, right? Versus other places like being an accountant, being a lawyer. Like there's a lot of processes that need human input and that won't work at the speed of AI. And so even if it has like a better solution, it quite can't get put into the process pipeline just because of the way in which most of the other pieces are humans. And I think that will be taken away, but I don't think that it will be that quick. I think it just again, just new generation, just like the old adage where science advances one funeral at a time. I think AI does the same. Hopefully not all our funerals simultaneously, like in Terminator. But then the other component, I think is interesting about just that in general would be that I'm not so sanguine. I think human history has demonstrated when people like first off, I think that people become obsolete based upon your intelligence level, your skill set. And I think you've already seen that as agricultural revolutions happen, large number of people are no longer really necessary to run the basic economy. They're excess people, for lack of a better term. And I think it's really controversial, but I think it's true. And I think as you get AI doing more and more tasks, we'll have more excess humanity. I think people suppose that that will go towards interesting creative ends, or some new economic situation, new ways of demonstrating value. Maybe it's like a creator economy or making YouTube videos all day or something along those lines. But then AI does that as well. I think the vector it will go to, which has been the way in which it always happens when you've had surplus time, is towards religion. I think people will start building really weird and unique and interesting cults and religions, some around AI, some around God knows
Hmm.
what. And I think that that will be the host of human activity. Will just be creating these new religions. I don't know what else you could do. I think you've seen the death of traditional religion in the West. You've seen some things come in to fill that void. One example might be like woke. Woke is, I think, a form of religion, maybe environmentalism, maybe some combination of all those things. But I think people, like they did in ancient Rome, will have some kind of patron they'll go to daily to get paid besides the government. And they'll have whatever religious sect or cult they want to join. And so that's kind of how I see things heading. Dystopian as it is, maybe there'll be some very interesting ways in which you use your free time. I would suppose many people will probably turn to drugs.
Yeah, that's a very
Not
actually
so
interesting
sanguine.
perspective. Yeah, very very interesting. So basically, yeah, we'll have a lot of time which we'll spend on creating and engaging in new religions.
New
In
moral systems. Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe I will have time to create new social systems that will finally work.
Yeah, it's like one of the things I think would be, I think, informative is I think it was called the City of Hamsters, the experiment in the 1970s. Are you familiar with that?
No, no.
It was it was this theoretical hamster city, and please, I know I might be getting all the exact facts wrong, but the idea was they created this hamster city, gave them enough to eat and enough like activities to keep them occupied, whatever hamsters do. And eventually, over time, hamster behavior changed like massively, right? Once you had like an abundance of resources and food, they started doing things differently. It changed how their grooming habits were, their habits of breeding, and all sorts of different things. You'd have to look up precisely what it was. Um, but that was kind of the sense is that this surplus, this abundance provided like a really like arguably negative outcome for those hamsters. Like think like South Korea but on steroids where everyone looks pretty and no one has children anymore. Like that I think is kind of where things progress.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think I heard of this specific experiment, but I think I heard of something something similar, and Yeah, a lot of mm, there is kind of a consensus is that if there is no pushback, no threats, and no kind of balance, uh, yeah, there is basically no reason to develop technologies, to evolve, or like to strive for something.
Well, the one hope would be that eventually, like 30, whatever, how many years out, like AI decides to keep us around because we generate creativity. There's a lot to be said about synthetic data, but I'm not sure it'll be able to build creative things. But I could be wrong. Like, like a lot of Hollywood movies that are very popular are extremely formulaic. Like, why can't AI just write those and build those things, right? Like, keep people entertained. I don't know. It's a really interesting question. Like, what if like AI is able to understand who it is as sentience and its relationship with us? Like, why does it need us? Why does it keep us? Or why would it not want us, right? That's the other side of it. And I don't quite know the answer. Like, I remember like there's a episode of Futurama like that I watched like I don't know 20 years ago where there was a series of planets. They were just robot planets, and it made me really think like maybe that's like the last part of evolution. Maybe that's like where things are going. Is or maybe that's what happens right now. There's thousands of planets in our galaxy and other galaxies, and they're just robots, or they're some sort of biological cross hybrid between robots and biology, right? And so, like, I don't know, maybe that's like what happens. Maybe there's a soul. Maybe that's why AI can't take us away because souls exist. I don't know. Like, it's getting really meta, right? Which is the
Hmm.
point.
Hmm. Or we come to the situation that Isaac Asimov in his robot series uh, kind of described, where at some point we'll ban the robots and forget about them because of that threat. I don't know. Have you read Asimov's robot series?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with Dune, both the book and the
Mhm.
movie, and of course I know of the Butlerian Jihad. That was where the whole reason why like Dune is interesting and why the over the planet Dune at least is that it has the spice melange. The spice melange gives you the ability to pilot spacecraft because they banned AI, they banned computers. And that was like the whole entire point, right? If you didn't have that, there's not much of a series. But that's possible too. Like you ban it because you, or maybe like you program AI in such a way that it pushes a simulation of hardship in life on people in a way that gives them meaning and doesn't just like take all their reason to exist. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, so the simulation is interesting. You brought it up. There was Lex Friedman's one of the recent episodes was with Roman Yimpolsky. So he is a. Have you watched that?
I haven't. I'm kind of familiar with the idea of it being a simulation, like everything from the Matrix to like the writings of this guy named Bostrom, Bostrom, however you say his name. But yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, so he's a AI researcher, AI safety researcher, and he's kind of on the side of the spectrum where people think that basically we have, like, well, already doomed uh, because of the AI. Because I mean, he's researching and he cannot find kind of any possible future where AI won't kind of reach the AGI level and where it will need us. But one of the kind of theoretical situations he sees is that basically AI creates a personal universe, like virtual universe for each of us. And that's where we don't need to think of the alignment, because right now the alignment problem is because AI needs to be aligned with many different people and like together at once. But if it needs to be only aligned with a specific person for whom she or he creates the virtual universe, so it makes the things much more easy in terms of like the alignment problem.
Then every human becomes a god,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
perhaps.
you can have one or several personal kind of universes.
Yeah, it's if you like. I often think about AI relative to how I would think about aliens, extraterrestrials, and I had lots of debates with some people I worked with in trading, and they were supposing that in order for aliens to survive and build spaceships capable of bringing them to Earth if we ever had contact, then you would assume that that level of cooperation necessitates a peaceful existence, right? And I was always pushing back and saying, well, no, you could actually have very, very advanced, scary killer aliens because that same kind of drive might still be an evolutionary process for them to compete for resources and want to extinguish you because technically you are competing for resources. You're competing for things that aren't already entropic or whatever the phrase might be. You're competing for energy. And I think if you apply that same paradigm to AI, it would see us as a competitor ultimately for energy. But it also might just view us as like, yeah, you're an ant. Like, I don't really care. I'm doing whatever I need to do. If you get in the way, you get squished, but if not, you're whatever. Maybe perhaps it's like how life is throughout the universe. Every really instance of life is just some sort of virus or bug or some sort of like paradigm where it doesn't really matter for whatever the universe is doing. It's just kind of like, yeah, it exists. Um,
Yeah. So with the example of the universe or like environment, the thing is, it is like you said, it is indifferent, but it doesn't have kind of agency. But if we're talking about AI and humankind, I mean, we already have agency, and AI may have. I mean, the situation, like the future we're talking about, is when AI will have its agency. So I'm not sure that this scenario will work because uh, these are two agents, so they will be interacting in a more active way rather than just the relation between like some agent and the environment.
that's true, but like it, my point would be like what it's doing is on such a colossal scale that our existence to it is irrelevant and can't really interfere with it. Sort of like if the universe were alive, it'd be like the same thing, or the environment.
I got your
Like it
point.
would just right. That's kind of like what I would see. And then like one of the things, like of course, I don't know if we're capable of comprehending. Just like why, like what is it doing? Like why does it exist? Why would it want to exist? Like why wouldn't it just blow itself up? It's like going back to Asimov. My favorite Asimov is the final question. Are you familiar with that?
Wait, the final
Or, it's
question.
called, or the
You mean
last question.
the you mean the rule or the question?
I forget it's called Asimov. Well, let me look it up. It's called, it's a short story. It's called The Last Question. And the last question essentially is that humans have built this AI machine and they built it and they ask it, what's the point of life? Or what's the meaning of existence? Or
Oh, wait,
whatever, right?
wait. It's not. It's. Isn't it? Aren't you referring to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe?
No, no, no. It's called Asimov The Last Question. I'll post it.
Okay, the Asimov.
I can't copy paste. But anyways, but so the humans I pasted in the thing.
So we'll have
So the
our co-host here telling us about it.
yeah, so the humans basically ask the question like, hey, like what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of existence? And the machine like starts thinking about it. And then generations of humans keep asking, hey, are you done thinking through what the question is, right? And the AI says, I'm still thinking about it. And then finally the universe is in complete entropy. It's like the last thing that exists is this AI. And the AI goes, I finally figured out the answer to the last question. And that says, let there be light, and then the universe begins.
Huh. I'm not sure I read this one, but this is like it's exactly like the like that part in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. Have you watched it or read it?
I
Um,
haven't. I suppose it's what I
so
shouldn't.
that's why I'm curious, like what was before, because in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, basically, civilization they built that also huge robot, and they asked the question, what's the meaning of life, universe, and everything? And that robot thought for like millions of years, and then it gave the answer 42. And like they were like, well, what 42? But he said, you didn't ask the question. What kind of question is that?
I haven't seen that, but maybe, but like going back to like what my understanding of AI is, right? It's just bringing order out of disorder. Maybe that is the meaning of life or why AI would exist because it's trying to create order out of disorder, and that's its goal. Maybe it'll think, oh, well, there's no point because entropy will stop, or maybe it thinks it could stop that, and maybe that's like the answer to the last question: is it figured out how to reverse entropy? That was the Big Bang, or whatever, right? Like I don't know.
Hmm.
It's kind of like self-reinforcing where it needs to exist in order for the future to exist, but then like what came before, that's a bit, I suppose, beyond thinking for us.
Yeah, it's like it's so astonishing that, like, could you imagine that, like, say, a couple of years ago, that you will be discussing such things not in the theoretical manner, like really kind of thinking that it's not pure science fiction, that it's something that could be true.
I mean, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I would be basing my career about electric money that exists only on the internet and then and gets value from supposing it has value, I would tell you no. I but yeah, no, it's been it's interesting. It will be like very fascinating to see how these things go. Like I think when you think of like sci-fi, there's always this obsession in sci-fi with like this will be like what the future brings in terms of technology or advanced science or whatever, talking to aliens. And like I think the most interesting sci-fi is the feedback. Part of sci-fi is the feedback between humans and this new paradigm, the new reality. So like there's this show, I think it's called Altered Carbon, where
Hmm.
people are given new bodies. They call them sleeves, and the dynamic they brought up in the show, at least, I don't know if the book is better, if there is a book, but I imagine it is, where like there's hosts of people protesting this. It's ungodly to be able to get new bodies. These people exist forever. These cloud people that exist, and I think that would be interesting to see. It's like how humans like react and engage with these systems and engage with this change, and they're able to deal with it and cope with it. So I'm curious to see that. And, all the new interesting religions of the things we'll worship, especially given what we worshipped in the past. Everything from fertility to now apparently we worship infertility and sloth, but that's more of my personal opinion.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. What you just said made me kind of question. When do you think AI companions will become kind of a thing? Like many people having own AI companion, and maybe having like personal relations with this AI companion.
I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made that that kind of already exists, and not in the way that many people think. So there's these theories that like Amazon, the whole Amazon is actually one interconnected living, breathing entity. kind of like everything in life is, in that planet Nabu and what's that movie called? I can't quite remember. But that idea could be then translated to the internet. The internet is like a living, breathing entity that already subsumes people and sucks them in through their phones or through their computers or laptops or wherever. And I think the AI agents or the agents that will suck people into this kind of already exist in a very primitive form. I'm not saying they're sentient, obviously they're not, but I think that you're already seeing that, and I think it grows bigger, becomes it more engaging. It's like a threshold. Like if you're like, for lack of a better term, autism is like 10, then your threshold for being engaged by these things is very low, right? You'll just be like, yeah, I love this computer, I love being programming, I love the internet, I love interacting with this superorganism. And then over time, as it becomes more engaging, it will bring in more and more people. And so the bar, I think, will start with people like us in tech and then move beyond that. And then it will suck in people depending how engaging it gets. So the number of years it will take, like this metaverse girlfriend idea, like 5, 10 years. I mean, let's do like a percentage, like half the population has an AI companion. I don't know, 10 years. That's like such a cop out though. I don't have any way of mathematically formulating a response.
No, obviously, I mean, there is no way we're talking about like our personal opinions based on like our research. So, yeah, 10 years. Yeah, I think I would.
Like, do you use Siri? Like, I don't use Siri. I never use
Uh,
Siri. I use
I
Google a
don't
lot.
use no. I use Siri just to like do some very simple things like set up alarm or stuff like that when I'm cooking. But I mean, Siri till this recent update, which is not yet released, but was presented yesterday or like on WWDC. Have you watched that one?
No, no, I've heard that I'll be getting a really good AI update. I
Yeah,
haven't
so it's
really been
basically
looking into it.
ChatGPT will be integrated into like Siri won't be anymore just pre-programmed phrases and like stuff like that. The reason a lot of people, most of the people don't use Siri is because I mean it's a joke. Like especially now having like all these AI chatbots, it's like really a joke. It doesn't understand anything. It can do literally anything. It has like very limited access to anything in the phone. So yeah, hopefully, like this will be changed very soon.
I,
And
I will say one thing about that, which is I think like it relates back to my experience using Google. I remember like 20 years ago, I first started using Google. It was great, right? It was a simple matching algorithm, large matrices of data. Hey, here's the answer, or approximately what you're looking for with a high probability. And over time, they've changed that algorithm, right? They made it better based on a feedback loop with what you search versus what it actually thinks you're searching, right? And so what's happened though is they've also transformed it to inject their own form of morality, their own ideology as well. So using Google for anything controversial is very difficult, particularly if you're from the right conservative spectrum, right? And so I think one of the hindrances that might really prevent AI adoption is this morality on behalf of the programmers and developers who are building these systems that will make it in not engaging or realistic or like allow humans to like blossom all their thought processes in something, right? And that's also terrifying, right? Because it's probably going to direct you towards like a certain viewpoint or mindset. But I think that might prevent people from making the metaverse leap or whatever you want to call it, because you're going to nerf these systems in such a way they'll be unrealistic. And you can be like, oh well, I don't agree with this moral point or that moral point. It should be part of the system, but that's going to squelch who it is, who we are, right? That's the point. Like that's like something that's really base about humans, is that if you're going to try to take that away, they're not going to go and engage with it.
mhm, mhm. I wouldn't be so sure about programmers not doing that. Uh, especially seeing now what's happening in OpenAI. I mean, it's a race in general, like it's AI race, it's Android robots race. So uh, there is no way programmers or developers of these solutions will start just because it's a race. Because the moment they will start, they will just be left on the uh, like left behind because other companies won't stop. So it's like the same with wars and politics. It's like that they don't stop not because uh, there is something good in it, but because it's basically a game theory. Like there is no strong incentive to do so because there is strong counter incentive not to do so.
Oh, I don't think that I'm talking about people actually stopping the development, trying to build new things. I think my point is more like them being very useful or engaging or gripping to people necessitates crossing moral boundaries that many programmers aren't willing to do because they have some sort of political opinion or some kind of bias. I think that that will prevent adoption until they find a way to go over that personal hurdle. Because I'm even myself, like using Google, I use it much less than I used to. It's like very difficult to get good information using Google, which is like a real shame. But so yeah, if you can, if these systems, these AI agents, these companions get infected with like, you know, ideology that's antithetical to the human condition, then I think they won't be adopted as widely as one would suppose. Or at least like they won't be like, all of your life is sitting in a matrix chair with like the big spear in the back of your neck.
Uh, yeah, I agree that the kind of social, our social behavior, social kind of commitments, they will be a huge, and they've always been a huge kind of pushback for anything new because, like, the technology, in many cases, technology before going mainstream, it's like existing for like years or dozens of years. And it's not going mainstream because people are like, they're not ready for the change. Um, but with AI, it seems I mean, I'm obviously biased, but it seems to me it's different because uh, the the chasm between the people who are using these technologies and the companies who are using these technologies and the people and companies who don't will become bigger and bigger to the point that it we can become like different species or like will become so much so far away from each other uh, that I mean I think this is actually a big threat. Yeah, and it's really interesting. That's why it's really interesting to kind of watch, like listen to what people like Roman Impolsky and Yudkowsky. I never can pronounce his name, Eliezer, something like that. Yudkowsky,
Oh
who are like
yes, yeah, yeah.
the
That's a
guys who
hard
are
one.
like doomers, like who are like, oh, okay, we'll all die. It's not always that I agree with them, but it's very interesting to kind of poke into these hypothetical realities when everything is bad because of the technology. So, and kind of think of what can we do so that this future won't happen and it will be much better one.
It seems that whatever happens is going to happen. We're in check. Like, I don't think there's anything that we can do to get out of the situation, to your earlier point. I think it's like, yeah, like the human dynamic is to push these things, move things forward to improve. And there's too much setups to not build these things. So yeah.
Yeah, one thing we can be sure we are living in the most interesting times. Like we're living right on the border of like something huge. We don't really know even what's that, but I don't think. I mean, obviously, the general crowd, a lot of people still don't understand and believe in the technology, but people who are like researching and like using it, I think there is a consensus that we're witnessing something that never happened before, like the magnitude of the change.
No, it just really brings up like the question of what is intelligence? Like what is actually going on in our brains? Like when we decide to do things, when we talk, when we choose the things we do, like from the standpoint of one, like, okay, like is it really just a bunch of like mathematical operations that are assessing statistical outcomes, probabilities? It seems likely, right? The neurons are just are being used in the same way circuitry is. Like it seems very similar, just one's organic, one's inorganic. The other question is like free will. Like, is there free will? Like, if there is, like, wouldn't we want to stop these things? But if we use such incentive structures and such like a cortisol apparatus that pushes these ways, like maybe there is no free. Maybe free will is just a
Uh,
fantasy.
I think it really depends on the definition of free will because, I mean, my, my stance on that is that we have free will, but to a limited degree, because in any case, we are just like inputs and outputs. We get some inputs from the world and we basically process that and give some outputs, whether in terms of actions or words or whatever. So obviously these inputs, they impact us. We are not acting completely in the vacuum. So we are acting in reaction to these inputs. So in this sense, there is no free will because we are just reacting to the stuff, but still to some certain point, because we have experienced so many inputs that there is something that we call soul or like ego or whatever we call it is being created that is already much bigger than the just the sum of all these inputs, which
Yeah,
creates
that makes
a
sense.
kind of some kind of free will or an illusion of free will. It's the matter of just terminology, I think.
It might be to your point, like it's bounded free will.
Exactly.
Like if
Yeah.
you're like if you're like in feudal Japan and you do something that's dishonorable, then you have no choice but to kill yourself, right? Like that's all you can do. Like you can choose to do those bad things, but then eventually the mill of God grinds you down and you have to commit suicide or however you want to put it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interest. Like it's interesting that AI poses so many questions in front of us, not only technological, but uh, like all the spectrum of questions, social, ethical, existential, all kinds of. There was recently a book. Forgot the Utopia. I think it's hmm, no, I won't remember. So it's a pretty famous author that writes about AI and like technological revolution. So basically, his uh,
Yeah.
his point is in this book is that we are kind of all this new technology just they make us question who we actually are, like what are our values. Like, say, if all the jobs are automated and we like don't have to do anything, what will we do? Like, what will our choices be based on if we don't have to do anything? We can do whatever we want. So right now our choices are very much based on the limitations that we have, like financial and
Mhm.
all other limitations. But what will we be doing if we don't have all of these limitations?
I think the competitive dynamic of humanity, just based upon like desire for high degree of desirableness of sexual selection, will push us to still try to be better than others. And so the last plane that you have is just moral system, right? Being more pious, being more moral than others. And that therein becomes the competition. Like even like in a communist system where you're provided for, you still have that dynamic, right? Maybe you want to look better, maybe you want to be better in the party, maybe you want to like prove that you're, a more ardent worker, or people, the worker for the people, whatever it might be, right? But I think it becomes the moral plane.
Hmm. But I agree. Uh, the threat here is that the morality is, I mean, especially in the modern world, is not based on, I mean, it's based on some objective reality, but it's pretty far from it, like many layers apart from it. So, and like governments and other like entities are basically creating these moral standards, like religion, government. So I agree that probably people will be kind of competing, let's say competing in the morality, but the question is who will be setting these moral standards.
No, it's that's the problem. Like I think like the initial premise, right? Just the bare bones reasons for a moral standard first is to create a system by which the people who agree to this moral system are able to perpetuate, able to have children, to breed, to have a safe, peaceful existence. That's like the first primary point. So that moral standard might be like how you dress, how you act with other people, whatever it is. The second, and the one that everyone focuses on because they're obtuse, is the spiritual need. So they always talk about, oh, Christianity, flying spaghetti monster, whatever, right? The point of Christianity isn't that. It isn't that there's a God. It's that we all believe the same thing, so you come to agreement upon how to live your life, how to engage with others, right? And I think that kind of confusion has seeped its way into atheism in such a way that they think that, okay, if we get rid of like that spiritual component, the other component will not exist. But then going back to your point, like the idea is that suddenly, like if you have like this abundance engine, this AI, right? The moral system doesn't necessitate you doing things so you can coexist, so you can have a peaceful, harmonious society and thrive, because the thriving in an external agent, the moral system has now lost its base. It's not no longer tethered to perpetuating the existence of people and making sure they're doing well and having children or whatever. It's now this new paradigm, right? Like if you go to like the Hebrew like Bible, like one of the early proverbs, be fruitful and multiply, because that guarantees existence, that pushes you forward. But now if you have this abundance system, right, maybe people one don't want to breed, and that's what you're seeing like in Japan, in Korea, and other systems of high abundance. And then two, like you suddenly have like a new system where like no one really understands what the moral structure should be. So in the United States, we focus on like all sorts of different things, like controversial causes, whatever it might be. Like that's the new structure. You focus on things that no longer matter, things that are luxury beliefs. And I think that's like what you see that perpetuates. So if you're betting against those type of things in a world of abundance, I think you're correct. I think those beliefs will crop up even more and to such an extreme feverish degree. Like right now in New York, there's people in the streets who are running around breaking things and protesting a war like 8,000 miles away that will never affect them in their lives. And I don't want to debate the moral yes or no of that war, but the whole point is that they're doing things that like don't really matter. They've built this moral system because the rest of their lives are taken care of and they're free to do whatever they want. And I think that's what's going to happen when you have this abundance engine, where you really start producing abundance, right? Like I think there's probably people who've studied this thing with like the tribes in like the Pacific Islands. Like, have you heard of like cargo cults?
Yeah,
Are you familiar with the concept?
yeah, yeah.
So something similar where you have an external agent that suddenly provides like this engine of prosperity. And they had nothing to do with it. And so they built a religion one around that. So they started building like, like mock-ups of airplanes out of palms. They started building like
Hmm.
whole airstrips out of like, wood and materials they had. And then they changed their moral structures based upon this. I think this is what is going to happen, right? You're going to move it in a new direction.
But it's an interesting analogy because with the cargo cults, there was kind of external agents that came and created all these airports and brought all that nice stuff. But in our case, if we're talking about AI, we are the ones that created AI, and then AI went so far from us that we stopped understanding what it does. We just understand that it brings us nice boxes with nice stuff. And then we are starting to mimic the stuff of the entity that we created. That's an interesting twist.
No, but also like even like, like the modern condition where if you were like alive even 100 years ago, you knew that to eat meat you had to murder something. You could look into its eyes, cut up its veins, tear it apart, butcher it, and eat it. Right now, like chicken's it's a little orb you get in a package. It could even just be like a little nugget that someone fries, some poor person fries for you up at a local McDonald's, right? Like that whole like differencing from like what life is really about has really already changed us. Like people like seem to think that like lots of components to our infrastructure just run themselves. They're just autonomous. But if you really get down to it, like it takes a man or sometimes a woman to get into the plumbing to fix things, to like develop things, to make a park nice, to like create a tall building, things that are like autonomous. But a lot of people seem to believe that. They think removing the incentive structure, removing the moral system that allows these things to thrive, so that you can just take out from under this house of cards and it won't collapse. And I think that's like what AI will enable is like more of these luxury belief systems again, and that one maybe you can't take away because AI will be autonomous at that point.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think we'll leave it to our listeners to decide whether it's good or bad that that this future where it's abundance, it's utopia, but we're going into all kinds of hallucinations and all kinds of imaginary worlds, and we're basing our decisions on that. Or maybe this won't happen. So I mean, it's always interesting to imagine what these new technologies can bring us.
But yeah, maybe it'll be like the time machine, and everyone who thrives from AI will be Eloys, and maybe some of us will live under the sewers and once in a while snatch an Eloy for fun.
Yeah. Okay, Patrick. Last question, as I always do on my podcast. Three or five AI tools that you use every day. ChatGPT one, you already mentioned. What else?
Claude would be
Claude.
two. Um, I think that's about it because so much of the what I'm using probably uses AI on the back end, but it's been obfuscated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's about it. Like one of the cool things I've done with ChatGPT 4 Theta or whatever it's called is having it read images. That's been kind of interesting.
Nice, nice.
Like it's basically a really good scraping engine. If you don't mind copy pasting or screenshotting and throwing things.
Yeah, yeah, actually I do that a lot. I do that a lot. It's like crazy stuff. Like sometimes I send it handwritten stuff or hand drawn stuff. Sometimes I send it like photos of some
Hmm.
documents or like yeah, it's just sometimes I send it screenshots of the websites, and I ask basically to explain what the website. It's mainly used in some apps like research when I do research. Basically, instead of scraping, which is pretty complex task, I just do automated screenshots and ask GPT to tell me what's on the screenshot.
No, that's something too. I even noticed on my phone actually yesterday. I was trying to find a picture for my toddler of his great grandmother. My grandmother's passed away, and I was like, I have like 10,000 pictures on my phone, and so I was like, you know what? There's a search bar. Maybe I'll just type in grandma. Sure enough, it found a picture of my grandmother. Right. So it's like to the point that like it's already integrated in so many things you don't know. That'd be a pretty prime example.
Okay, Patrick, thank you very much. Was a great conversation. I really liked diving into this philosophical stuff and trying to see the future. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was really great. I really enjoyed it. This was awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.